All right, so far we know that Roscuro has taken the princess along with Midori to the dungeon where they're going to keep her forever. That seems to be Roscuro's plan. And we also know that Brotticelli is going to help Despero get to the princess, but in reality, he's not only going to help him get there, he's also probably going to kill him and also eat him because that seems to be what rats do in the dungeon to mice. Now we're going to find out if Despero is actually going to trust this rat to bring him to where the princess and Roscuro and Midori are hiding, or is he going to try and do it on his own? Chapter 48, On the Tail of a Rat. Have you ever held the tail of a rat? At best, it is unpleasant sensation, scaly and cold, similar to holding a narrow snake. And at worst, when you are dependent on that rat for your survival, and when a part of you is certain that you are being led to nowhere except your death, it is a hideous sensation. Indeed, to have nothing but a rat's tail to cling on is absolutely hideous. Nonetheless, Despero held on to Bronticelli Remorso, and that rat led him deeper and deeper into the dungeon. Despero's eyes had, by this point, adjusted quite well to the darkness, although it would have been better if they had not, for the things he saw made him shiver and shake. What did he see? He saw on the floor of the dungeon was littered with tufts of fur, knots of red thread, and the skeletons of mice. Everywhere there were tiny white bones glowing in the darkness. And he saw, in the dungeon tunnels through which Brotticelli led him, the bones of human beings, too. Grinning skulls, delicate finger bones, rising up from the darkness, pointed towards some truth best left unspoken. Despero closed his eyes. But it didn't help. If he saw, as his eyes were still open, the white bones and tufts of hair, he saw the exact same thing in his mind. But he also saw the despair of when those people and rats and mice were still alive. "Ha ha! Exactly!" Brotticelli laughed as he navigated the twists and turns. "Oh, yes, exactly." If what was in front of Despero was too horrible to contemplate, what followed him was, perhaps, even worse. Rats, happy, hungry, a vengeful parade of rats, their noses up in the air, sniffing and smelling. "Mouse," sang one of the rats joyfully. Oh, yes, mouse," agreed another. "But something else, too. Soup," called out another rat. "Yes, soup," agreed another. "Blood," rang the voices of the rats. "Blood," they all agreed together. And then they sang. "Here, mousey, 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 here, little mouse." Brotticelli called out to the other rats. "Mine," he said. "This little treasure is all mine, gentlemen and ladies. Please, I beg you, do not infringe on my discovery." "Mr. Remorso," said some of the rats. Yes, Mr. Remorso," said Despero. He turned and looked behind him and saw the rats, their red eyes and their smiling mouths. He closed his eyes again. He kept them closed. "Mr. Remorso," he shouted. "Yes," said Brotticelli. "Mr. Remorso," said Despero, and he was crying now. He couldn't help it. "Please, the princess." "Tears," shouted the rats. "We smell tears, mousey." "Please," shouted Despero. "Little friend," said Brotticelli, "little Despero Tilling, I promised you, and I will keep that promise." The rat stopped. "Look ahead of you. What do you see?" Despero opened his eyes. "Light," he said. "Exactly. Light." Again, reader, we must go backward to go forward. We must consider for a moment what had occurred with the rat and the serving girl and the princess down in the dungeon before Despero made his way to them. What happened was this. Roscuro led P and Midge deep into the dungeon to a hidden chamber, and there he directed Midge to put the princess in chains. "Gore," said Midge. "She's going to have a hard time learning her lessons if she's all chained up like this." "Do as I say," said Roscuro. "Maybe," said Midge, "before I lock her up, her and me could switch outfits, so we could start in already with her being me and me being a princess." "Oh, yeah, sure, whatever," said Roscuro. "Certainly. A wonderful idea. Miss Midori, princess, take off your crown and give it to the serving girl." The P sighed and took off her crown and handed it to Midge, and Midge put it on, and it slid immediately right down her small head and came to rest quite painfully on her poor abused ears. "It's a biggish thing," she said, "and painful like." "Well, well," said Roscuro. How do I look? Midge said, smiling at him. Ridiculous, he said. Laughable. Midge stood blinking back tears. You mean I don't look like a princess? She said to the rat. I mean, you will never look like a princess, no matter how big a crown you put on your tiny head. You look exactly like the fool you are and always will be. Now make yourself useful and chain the princess up. Dress-up time is over. Midge sniffed and wiped her eyes, and then bent to look at the pile of chains and locks on the floor. And now, princess, he said, I'm afraid that the time for your truth has arrived. I will tell you what your future holds. As you consign me to darkness, I will so consign you, too, to a life spent in the dungeon. Midgery looked up. Ain't she going back upstairs to be my serving maid? No, said Roscuro. Ain't I going to be a princess, then? No, said Roscuro. But I want to be a princess, said Midge. No one, said Roscuro, cares what you want. As you know, reader, Midgery had heard this sentiment expressed many times in her short life, but now in the dungeon it hit her full force. The rat was right. No one cared what she wanted. No one ever had cared. And perhaps, worst of all, no one ever would. I want, cried Midgery. Shh, said the princess. Shut up, said the rat. I want, sobbed Midge. I want. What do you want, Midge? The princess said softly. Huh? What do you want, Midgery? Said the princess. Don't ask her that, said Roscuro. Shut up, the both of you. But it was too late. The words had been said. The question had at last been asked. The world stopped spinning, and all of creation held its breath, waiting to hear what it was that Midgery Sow actually wanted. I want, said Midgery. Yes, shouted the Pea. I want my mom, cried Midgery into the silent waiting world. I want my mom. Oh, said the princess. She held out her hand to Midge, and Midge took hold of it. I want my mother, too, said the princess softly, and she squeezed Midge's hand. Stop it, shouted Roscuro. Chain her up. Just chain her up. Gore, said Midge. I ain't gonna do it. You can't make me do it. I got the knife, don't I? She took out the knife and held it up. If you have any sense at all, said Roscuro, and I heartily doubt that you do, you will not use that knife on me. Without me, you'll never find your way out of the dungeon, and you will starve to death here, or worse. Gore, said Midge, then lead us out now, or I'll chop you up into little rat bits. No, said Roscuro, the princess shall stay here in the darkness, and you, Midge, will stay with her. But I want to go upstairs, said Midge. I'm afraid that we are stuck here, Midge, shouted the princess, unless the rat has a change of heart and decides to lead us out. There will be no changes of heart, said Roscuro. None. Gore, said Midge. She lowered the knife. And so the rat and the princess and the serving girl sat together in the dungeon as, outside the castle, the sun rose, and moved through the sky and sank to the earth again, and night fell. They sat together until the candle had burned out, and another one had to be lit. They sat together in the dungeon. They sat and sat. And reader, truthfully, they might be sitting there still if a mouse had not arrived. Chapter 50, in which the princess says his name. Princess, Despero shouted. Princess, I have come to save you. The Princess Pea heard her name, and she looked up. Despero, she whispered, and then she shouted it. Despero! Reader, nothing is sweeter and more sad in this world than the sound of someone you love calling your name, particularly when they're chained to a wall. Nothing. For Despero, the sound was worth everything. He lost his tail, his trip to the dungeon, back out of it, and back into it again. He ran towards the princess, but Roscuro was baring his teeth and blocked the mouse's way. The princess cried, Oh no, Rat, please don't hurt him, he's my friend. Midge said, Don't worry, princess, I will save the Meesee. She took the kitchen knife and aimed to cut off the rat's head, but missed her mark. Whoopsie! The end. Now we'll get to see what happens after Midge missed cutting off Roscuro's head, trying to save Despero. See you later.